All right, everybody. We've got another very special guest for you, a returning special guest. Everybody, welcome back to the show, David Pepose. Welcome,
Hi.
David.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Excited to be back on the show and excited to talk all things comics with you today.
Yeah,
Hell
we're
yeah.
not talking about comics, actually. We're going to shift gears to video games today. No, I'm just kidding.
Uh-oh.
Mike wants to talk about Magic the Gathering real
Yeah,
quick.
Magic the Get. No, I don't. I
Some
won't let
SpongeBob
anybody.
cards got
I
announced.
won't. Yeah, I won't let anybody suffer through that bull crap. Just myself. That's my own personal struggle. And yeah, thanks for being back, David. It's really great to have you back, especially because Space Ghost is probably I think Chris is too my favorite book ongoing right now. And I remember last time we talked to you, I think, we talked a little Punisher, we talked a little bit of Space Ghost, and little did I know, and I don't know if you knew either, that it would blow up like it did, because I venture into a lot of comic shops across the US, and it's never on the shelves in any of them.
uh, that's good. I think. I hope.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it is.
I would hope so.
As long as they're selling out and
hmm
it makes me happy. I always want to be there for the retailers. But you hit it right on the head, Mike. I definitely. I didn't expect Space Ghost to really be as monster of a success as it has been, and I really attribute that to a number of things. I think Space Ghost's cultural footprint, I think, has been really underestimated.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
it is generational. You have the fans of the '60s run, you have fans of the '80s revival, you have fans of Coast to Coast, and so you have all this kind of block of people who want to see Space Ghost treated with respect, and they want to see like a fresh new take on the character. And I think between that and Jonathan Lau's amazing artwork on the book,
Yeah,
and I
absolutely
think
amazing.
I think the way that we've structured it, where it's very episodic, a lot of done in ones, done in twos. It all kind of hinges on the villain of the week, but also the emotional dynamic between Space Ghost and Jan and Jason Blip. I think that's really we've kind of found our sweet spot with that book, and I want to give Dynamite, our publisher, a lot of credit because this wouldn't have happened if they hadn't offered us such a generous runway on the book. And so me having that initial 12 issues in an annual to kind of pace out a storyline, and I think I can say it here, we are going to be doing more thanks to uh, uh, seeing how the monster responds to this book. And so
Nice.
having that long runway, being able to plan that way, it's a real gift as a writer, and it's not one that you often get, especially in today's volatile marketplace. So I think the stars really aligned for us on this book, and it helps that I'm just I believe in it. We all believe in this book. We believe in the story we're telling. We believe in Space Ghost as a character, and Jan and Jason Blip as characters, and the Council of Doom as characters, and so yeah, I'm very excited. The future is bright for Space Ghost
Nice.
Yeah.
and Space Ghost fans, and we owe all of that success to the army of fans and retailers and press and fellow creators who really just kind of rallied around that book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
bro.
and I going into this when this was announced, I was so happy about it because I love that old Hanna-Barbera stuff. And when DC brought it back years ago and did all those fun books like the Flintstones, and
Yeah.
there was even the Space Ghost book then, I ate that up. But I figured that was it. Like, I didn't know there were so many people out there that love this. And then when I saw this book, not only your name attached, which obviously we have a lot of respect for you,
Yeah.
but seeing Jonathan's art
Yeah.
was game changer, man. Like, I couldn't believe they gave you such an amazing artist to put behind this book. And then as I was reading it, 5, 6 issues in, we were saying on the show every week, Mike and I, like, hands down the best work you've ever done. Like, and that's saying a lot because you've done some really good books
Yeah,
over
he
the
does
years.
some really great stuff.
But I just couldn't believe how good the book was, to the point where I felt like I could hand this to somebody who's doesn't care about Space Ghost and they would enjoy it. Like,
That
it's
was me.
taken
I
very
mean,
well.
yeah, I didn't care much for him, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
that's I think ultimately been my goal for every book that I try to write, is that I've listen. I'm not here to preach to the choir. I want converts.
Hmm.
Right.
And so for me, I'm always thinking, how can we make this book as accessible as possible? That we can, there's certain elements of continuity that you can draw from, but like you want to make sure that like a civilian can read this thing and it still makes sense in like a normal person human level.
Mhm.
And so I appreciate the kind words on Space Ghost because I think I've been able to kind of bring together a lot of lessons that I've learned over the course of my career. That and I owe that to dating back to my early creator-owned work to the kind of the boot camp that I've had at Marvel, where I feel like I've
Right.
really learned a lot about how to step up my game and how to kind of to lean into my strengths, but also to kind of cut back on some of my weaknesses. And so I think, in particular, Space Ghost, I owe a lot to my run on the Punisher. That Punisher miniseries, I really learned a lot on that. And this was something, I owe so much of Space Ghost's success to my editor Tom Brevoort over at Marvel, where
That's
he was
great.
the one who really instilled this idea of like, oh, if we did done in one stories, that would like really make things accessible, and it would make each issue kind of feel interesting and stand on its own 2 feet. I think doing it as a 4 issue mini, the effect wasn't able to build. I think it is a bit of a snowball effect. I've noticed now, as we're talking, issue 11 of Space Ghost just came out, and I feel like only in the last like week or two, between issue 10 and issue 11 coming out in back to back weeks, I'm noticing more and more people start to like accept Space Ghost as like a book that they can rely on,
Uh-huh.
which is great to hear. But I do think it speaks volumes about where we are in the industry right now, that it does take a book uh, 10 or 11 months of being this consistent
Hmm.
um, for it to start to catch on.
Right.
So I don't know. I think I really I put my whole ass into this one,
That's awesome.
for Space Ghost, and I think for me it's how do I kind of write the most impactful story that I can, but really kind of trying to keep it as streamlined as possible. I know I look at my work now versus my work when I started, and I'm like, oh, I wrote a lot more. There are books that could be considered overwritten, or at least staring in that direction. Whereas I think like Space Ghost, like it feels muscular, it feels like it's like the right kind of pacing.
Mhm.
So I but yeah, it's like I've been in this business now. Let's see, it'll be 8 years in in May since my first book came out, and like, it's all a learning curve. And I think it's one thing when you're starting in the indies that you're able to speak to your tribe. You find your true believers. You find the people who are looking for something off the beaten path, and so they're much more predisposed to talking you up and appreciating your strengths, which is invaluable for a young writer. I think it's once you hit that bigger spotlight when you are doing something in Marvel or DC. That's like I think a very needed part of a creator's career, is that you suddenly learn like, oh, here's where my strengths are, but here's weaknesses that I never considered. And I feel like I've really every book, I'm like I look back and I'm like, okay, these are things I really like, and here's things. Oh, now that I know what I'm doing more, now that I have more experience, now with the benefit of hindsight, I could have done this differently.
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
even feel that way now with Space Ghost, where I see issues and I'm like, I really like this. 10 issues more experience down the line, I could have done this differently. And I think that's ultimately, I hope, a good sign of being a healthy creator, is that like you're never going to rest on your laurels. You're never going to sort of
Right.
say, okay, the formula is done, the recipe is complete. It's always going to be a work in progress. And for me, I hope that philosophy will serve me well as my career continues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I think so, and I mean, now when you talk about getting into the, because I think when we last talked to you, you were just, the Punisher book was just about to come out. I don't think it had
Mhm.
come out yet.
Yeah.
And so you attribute to guys like Tom Brevoort now that you're working with at a Marvel level to giving that experience, because I mean that's the guy that can pull out like a sentence from a book 40 years ago and like a side
Yeah.
issue, you know what I mean? So like that experience and that history of like what he's seen across all levels and edited, it's got to be such a
Yeah.
huge.
Well,
tool.
Tom really, the thing I love most about working with Tom Brevoort is, first off, I think he's got a lot of integrity for an editor.
Hmm.
And I think, you don't always find that. I've interacted with people in the industry before, people who, can approve books, who,
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, like the interactions that I've had, like this doesn't feel like a business relationship that like I would feel
Yeah.
comfortable. Whereas like Tom, like, he stands up for his creators.
Hmm.
He really holds our feet to the fire to make sure that the books are actually good. I was struck when I first started working with him on Savage Avengers that I wrote like a long pitch document for him
Uh-huh.
with a couple of different possible angles for the book, and he went through and like redlined the whole thing and was like talking about like here's why like this wouldn't work, and I like this, like let's dig in more on this, like very granular specific notes. And I was very struck. I was like, oh, this guy who's spinning this many plates is able to do that. That like for him, like he's not just like, oh, well, this book's, all right, it's just a book. It's not product to him. And I think
Yeah.
that's like a take that has made him such a leader in the
Mhm.
industry. And so, yeah, I love working with Tom. He's also got a great eye for talent, just as far as the art is concerned. Like that Punisher miniseries, I think one of the highlights of that mini for me was seeing Dave Wachter and Dan Brown on art. Like that's a good looking book.
Yeah.
Carlos Magno on Savage Avengers, is another example. Like so it's been nice. I got to work with Fareed Karami before he was on Avengers, because we were doing Avengers Unlimited together.
Oh yeah.
So like I feel like I've been very fortunate to work with Tom, and yeah, just a really good editor to work with, and I think every editor I've worked with since, the bar is very very high because Tom
Yeah.
Brevoort has said it.
Yeah. It's Tom and then everybody else, right? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Tom's a one of a kind when you listen to him
Yeah.
because he not only is he's the perfect guy for Marvel because he has that love for for the industry and for that company,
Yeah,
but then like he knows storytelling like no one else.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
I love listening to him talk.
Yeah.
yeah. I've learned quite a bit working with him,
Yeah.
and I've said like I wouldn't have been ready to write Space Ghost if I hadn't worked
Hmm.
with him first. So I think, yeah, he's a very talented guy to work under, and yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunities he's given me, and I'll follow him into hell if that's what he asks. Wherever he wants to send me,
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it because, yeah, I think Tom's changed my life in a lot of ways, and he's changed me as a writer, and I think only for the better.
And that's actually kind of a good segue to the next book. And I when this got announced recently, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't like this character. I never cared for the cartoon. I'm not a fan. And I literally sat here on the show and told Mike, like, fucking David's gonna get me to read Captain Planet.
I'm gonna make him
So
Captain Planet.
sell me more on Captain Planet. Why should someone who doesn't like that old cartoon, didn't care for it when he was a kid, what's gonna get
So
me in?
let me tell you, Captain Planet is. I've been pitching this book around the comics industry for 10 years. I've believed in this book for a very long time, and I'm going to tell you why. Is I know the original Captain Planet cartoon often gets a bad rap for a couple of reasons. It's very much a product of its time. The mullet, the crop top,
Oh yeah.
and the argument that it's a little less than subtle.
Yeah. Right.
And what I would say is for the former, it's very easy to make Captain Planet. It doesn't take a whole lot to just update it for the year 2025 and make it
Right.
feel very present and feel of today's moment, the world outside our window today. But I would argue also reality's gotten a lot less subtle. And so, the people who would have been seen as like these over the top eco villains in 1990, now they're running the government. So like it's one of those things. I think Captain Planet for me is I always had the building blocks to success. So when you take away all the stuff that I just talked about, uh, so let's see. As far as the cast is concerned, it's inherently diverse and multicultural and international in a way we haven't seen since Giant Size X-Men, which means that we've got a lot of cool characters from very unique, different backgrounds and walks of life. These very strong personalities that when you put them in a room, the sparks really start to fly. the threats that they face are extremely timely. It's not just environmental change. We're way past that. It's environmental disaster right now. I live in Los Angeles. We just had the wildfires. I was in New York during Hurricane Sandy. I remember those. My parents live in the Midwest. The 15 tornadoes just hit St. Louis this week. Environmental disaster. This is a disaster movie that we're all extras in right now. And on the flip side of that, what's fueling all this? It's human greed. It's human greed and corruption and arrogance and ambition. And so Captain Planet, even in the original cartoon, never shied away from that. And then lastly, the thing that I'm really excited about is that pop culture has caught up to it. I've pitched this book as X-Men 2 meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's the story of 5 people from around the world who are suddenly given extraordinary power, and they find themselves on the run from a corrupt billionaire who seeks to exploit them to perpetuate a corrupt system. That's very timely in the year 2025. And so,
Yep.
with these powers combined, you've got the basis for a really cool superhero and a really cool superhero universe built on a concept that everybody has overlooked for the last 30 years. And so that's something that I've been really carrying a torch for a long time, because I do feel like Captain Planet has been overdue a 21st century revival and reimagining. And it's very much a character, a hero who I think meets today's moment, and one that I think is becoming timelier and timelier by the second.
And what went into the redesign for the character? Because I don't remember him having the shoulder pads like that, or the symbol having the branches coming out or anything like that.
Yeah. So what we wanted to do was really one of the main things I said about Captain Planet was we want him to have a redesign. I think I felt like that was sort of one of the biggest most immediate bars for entry for that character. He's very much a product of 1990. And in 1990, the mullet and the crop top, that was really cool, and that was in. You look at it now and you're like, oh, that's something that could be seen as maybe a little dated. And so for me, working in conjunction with artist Aman Casalos, I said, I really want to put a bold redesign to this character. Something that really says this is ours. And this is a character that speaks to the year 2025 versus the year 1990. And so something I wanted to lean into was Cap as this immortal elemental hero, that he's been around since the dawn of time. But he's not made out of flesh and blood like you and me. He's made out of rocks and ice and flame and wind. And so we wanted to I pitched him as Superman meets Metamorpho, in terms of his look. So you wanted to see bits of the different elements. And so you see, the rocky pauldrons, and you see the roots kind of growing into to that heart symbol. You see his hair is made out of green flame. His skin has this kind of icy tone to it, and then his eyes are blue, but it's not like a natural blue like you and me have. It's something that's stronger. And it's funny, the beard. I love the idea of the beard of hot dad Captain Planet. It's sort of it's the one bit of global warming I'll push for.
That's awesome.
That came. That was Aman. Aman. Based on I did some write ups of some things I'd like to see in Captain Planet and Planeteers. Mm-hmm. He drew a couple of different versions of the character. And one of them had a beard, and every single one of us just was like, beard? I zoomed in on that. Our editor, Joe Rybant, zoomed in on that. Everybody at Warner Brothers zoomed in on that.
Wow.
We thought it was a nice way, not only to sort of plant our flag design-wise,
Mm-hmm.
You see Absolute Batman, super jacked. Ultimate Spider-Man, got the beard. Space Ghost, even, or Jonathan Lautake, super jacked. So I guess Captain Planet's got the beard. Yep. And, but I think it also speaks really well to him as a character. I think we're not doing the grim and gritty Captain Planet. That couldn't be further from what this book is. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more of a grounded superhero take, but there's still elevated elements, obviously, because it's Captain Planet. But for me, he's got this. He's a hero. He's got this heroism that's timeless. That's classic. It never goes out of style. His whole mission is, he wants to protect our world because he doesn't want to see anybody die. that's his core ethos. And so, he's got that Superman, Captain America kind of reassuring aura to him. And so the idea of having that dad beard really, I think, solidifies him as this fatherly kind of mentor figure for the Planeteers, who they do find themselves in the run. And without spoiling too much, they're not going to really be able to turn to Gaia or Hope Island for help. They're on their own. So Cap is kind of that guy who, when he's able to appear, and and even in the moments when he's not able to sort of take that corporeal form, he's still there. He's still kind of trying to help steer the ship for them a little bit. He's sort of the he can offer advice when needed, and I think that I think is the right kind of balance for me for Captain Planet and the Planeteers, is that it is ultimately their story. We need to give them the agency. They need to kind of be the ones at the tip of the spear. But when the chips are really down and there's no one else left to turn to, Captain Planet is sort of the, in case of emergency, break glass, last resort. And so, yeah, when he shows up, you're going to be safe or he's going to die trying.
And are you taking like a similar approach to the storytelling with this? Like with Space Ghost, with the like a Saturday morning cartoon 1 and 2 shot stories, or
so structurally we are handling this one a little bit differently in that because there's so much mythology and there's so many characters to juggle. If Space Ghost is sort of my my punchy episodic show, this is like my epic blockbuster action movie version of Captain Planet. So we're starting off with a 6-issue origin, where we're going to see like the Planeteers kind of assemble for the first time. We're going to see how they deal with Lucian Plunder, and sort of his overarching schemes, and how does this team actually form together as a team. That said, we do have some other villains that we've got kind of in the back pocket that
like the crappy villain of the week.
Yes. It's just so interesting because like I think those eco villains in a lot of ways, they've got such unique concepts to themselves, and there's stuff that doesn't require like a whole lot of retooling. Like I said, my goal is to make Captain Planet, this series, feel like it could exist in the world outside your window. And so the villains, they're all rooted in human greed and corruption. And so, finding characters like Lucian Plunder, for example, as sort of our Elon Musk ruthless billionaire type, like that, I've wanted Lucian to be the villain for a long time. But now it's like, oh, Lucian Plunder just like threw a Nazi salute at the inauguration. This feels like now more timely than even I expected.
Right.
Duke Nukem, we've got a really cool redesign on him that I think really speaks to the elevated nature of that character, but still feels plausible in its own way. So, and we've got a few villains that we're kind of keeping a little closer to the vest, and then a few other iconic ones that, like, if we decide we're going to tell more stories with this character, very timely villains that we can do some really cool stuff with. So, and I think also just these characters, I mean, the Planeteers are so interesting to me, and the fact that, like, the way that we've been able to recontextualize them and the way that we're able to leverage their unique abilities in very cool and visually dynamic ways. The Planeteers are a really fun cast. And so I certainly would be down to be writing them.
Last week, we were, Mike and I were on the show with our guests last week and talking off air about like some of the different villains and going through them and making a lot of good, fun comments about Captain Pollution.
Just like,
can you confirm or deny Captain Pollution?
I cannot confirm or deny. All I could say is that, if Captain Pollution did show up, he'd probably have Cap on his heels a little bit.
Yeah,
I think. I think they do it. Like, there's not as many villains in Captain Planet as there are on Space Ghost, but I do think, like, I was surprised at how many of them I was like, I could do something cool with this. Like, they do have, I think they each have a very unique high concept to them and a unique look, that I'm like, oh yeah, like, it doesn't take much to, like, kind of twist these things for, like, to reflect, to better reflect the world outside our window.
And I know we went down the rabbit hole of, I guess I didn't realize in the 90s the amazing, like, stacked voice cast they had for the show.
Yeah.
It's insane, the level of talent. Yeah.
Well, Tom Cruise was originally supposed to be the voice for Captain Planet.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
Oh, really?
That's wild.
and that obviously didn't work out. But
Yeah.
I think for me, one thing that I think is particularly interesting about this book is how do we kind of, how's the world changed? The
Hmm.
world's changed quite a bit in 35 years.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
how do we reflect that in these characters? I think something that I really like about what Ted Turner and Barbara Pyle had in mind for the original Captain Planet is they really were pushing for diversity and inclusion. Generations before we were ever talking about it, it was so
Right.
forward thinking, it was almost considered subversive. I mean, for
Yeah.
example, you have a character like Linka, who in the original cartoon, she was from the Soviet Union. To have a heroic character from the Soviet Union in the year
Hmm.
1980, that's subversive.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. Yeah.
and the fact that all of these characters, they were chosen from different walks of life, and different nationalities. And so for us, it was how do we push that envelope even further? And also reflect the shift in geopolitics and the environmental conversation since then. So, like for example, we have Kwame, who he's a former soccer star from Ghana, who he's trying to figure out kind of what he's doing with his life after he suffers a career-ending knee injury. So it's like how does he live his life now as a disabled person? What is his future going to hold? But also, he's got this he's got this innate leadership to him. I pitched him as like Cyclops meets Sam from Ted Lasso, where he's got that kind of quiet confidence and charm to him as a former soccer captain. Like he knows how to think tactically. He knows how to kind of maneuver a group. Um, but he's the character who, it doesn't matter what life throws at Kwame, he always finds a way to get back up. And I think that's something that's like really, he's one of my favorites to write. Wheeler, who is our American of the cast, we've recontextualized it as an auto worker from Detroit because I felt like that was something that was really important to have a skeptic on the team and somebody who might have a more complicated relationship with the
Yeah.
environmental movement because of the way that he thinks it's impacted his livelihood. Uh, because I think a big question, and it goes back to something that you were saying at the beginning, Chris, which is, there's a lot of people who overlook Captain Planet. They say, why does this matter? Like, why should I read this? Why should I give a damn about this character and this mission? And that's Wheeler's whole arc. He's our POV character in a lot of ways, is that you get to see like him sort of like join the team and then kind of doubt the team and then kind of figure out like why is this important? Why can't you just turf it to somebody else? Like it's got to be people like you and me on the street level, who are fixing all these things. Linka, I mentioned her earlier, and she's my favorite character of the whole roster. We've done such a big 180 on her. In the original cartoon, she was the conservative Planeteer from the Soviet Union, and obviously things have changed quite a bit in Russia in the
Yeah.
last 35 years. And so Linka now, she's actually the most liberal of the Planeteers. She headlines an underground eco-activist punk band in the vein of like Pussy Riot.
That's
And
awesome.
she's super fun in that like she's the one who believes in this in the team's cause and the message. She's the one who thinks politically, and she's kind of like our Ilyana Rasputin. She's our Wolverine. Like she's the team scrapper. And I don't tend to write like this, but like she's the character who always has found ways to surprise me in this book. Um, and so and then rounding out the team, we've got Guy, who is a marine biologist from South Korea. And in the original cartoon, that just meant like she put on wetsuits and like swam around with the dolphins. But I feel like
Exactly.
in a lot of ways, she reminds me of how I wrote Black Knight in the pages of Savage Avengers. You having a team scientist is very useful
Hmm.
when you're writing comics in this genre. Somebody who can kind of connect the dots and figure out how everything works. But I love also the fact that like she's somebody who loves her job. Like
Hmm.
she's genuinely like excitable about science.
Right.
And she's a little bit of a geek, but like she loves her job, and she's really the heart of the team. She's the kid sister of the group. And everybody kind of underestimates her as a result. But as we see, as a scientist, she's the one who knows the stakes. She knows what could really happen. And so for her, hope is kind of like a revolutionary act. Because what's the alternative? Like you just curl up into a ball and just give up.
Right.
And speaking of kind of like our darker brooding characters, Mati is kind of the character that we've done the biggest punch up to, um, because in the original show he was seen as the punchline,
Yeah,
this
he
very
was. Yeah.
wide-eyed innocent kid with the power of heart, and what the hell is the power of heart? And if I had a nickel for every time somebody asked me that, I'd have a lot of nickels. Um, for me, the power of heart is it's tactical telepathy. And so Mati is a character who, we've recast him as, he's an indigenous person from Brazil whose people were being forced off their lands for corrupt mining interests. And he was ready to fight back in a particularly bloody and violent way until he gets the power of art. And suddenly it cleanses his mind of all rage and violence and anger and turns him into this avowed pacifist who can absolutely wreck you. Uh, Mati, like, he doesn't need to throw a punch because the power of heart, he doesn't need to. He can summon animals. He can reach into your mind and make you see things that aren't there. His ring also houses Captain Planet's consciousness. And so when Cap isn't being formed in our physical world, Cap can still kind of chime in, through Mati. And so he's kind of our X factor of the group. He's very much our Batman, our Shang-Chi. He kind of like he doesn't say a whole lot, but when he does, it's important. And he swerves in and out. He's very much like the man of mystery for the team. Like, he doesn't really always explain himself. And I think that for him, it speaks both to his background, and I think maybe his own internal conflict of like, this was what I was about to do, and like, is this the kind of person I am? But also just like the power of heart means that like sometimes he can just read your mind, and so like the social nuance kind of like, he skips ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
So you have these five very strong personalities in the same room, and then you put them together, and it's really fun. You see the sparks start to fly, and you see these unexpected pairings and these unexpected rivalries, and so I think a big influence I've had for this opening story is also the first Avengers movie, where you see those characters kind of come together, and they're not always the most friendly at first. And so you're going to be seeing some really cool dynamics with these characters, and seeing them all come together for the first time. That was a big appeal to writing this book.
I will say very appropriately while you were talking, David, my watch goes off and there are severe thunderstorms in my area. So,
Yeah.
If they have like a Magic School Bus ongoing or something, I probably won't be reading that book. That's where I draw the line, guys. The Magic School Bus.
I won't make you read a Magic School Bus reboot.
Because I just remember to watch Captain Planet, I had to make it through Magic School Bus, and I was like, I cannot do this anymore when I was.
Yes,
I always say on the show that, Mike, you're kind of the yin to my yang in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I read the fuck out of a Magic School Bus ongoing.
See, I don't know. I guess we've already, David already did a Magic School Bus, but it was like post-apocalyptic, and it was called Scouts Honor. That is your Magic School Bus. That's what happens after the Magic School Bus is over, but yeah, I'm excited for this, and I guess we can move on to one that I had my reservations about, just because, I'm not a writer. You're the writer here, David, so you can tell us. But I think it's particularly hard to write interesting. You know how we talk about like kung fu or action in comics? It's up to the artist to make it interesting. Now, on the same side of Speed Racer that we have coming out, I feel it's very hard to make racing or driving exciting, and the only time I can think of it working in a book was like Initial D, right? That's what everybody talks about for like racing in comics, manga. So like, what do you do it here? What's the approach? How did you agree to this?
Well, so it's funny. Initial D is one of the big influences on our run, as well as
glad to hear it.
All new Ghost Rider with Trad Moore, the Hawkeye chase sequence that David Aja did. For me, I love car chases in comics, and you can see it from my earliest work. The second comic that I ever got printed with my name on it was the second issue of Spencer and Locke, which was hinged on a big car chase sequence, and then we did another motorcycle versus take car chase in Spencer and Locke too. I love car chases. I do it in just about every book I can fit it in. You even see it. Devil That Wears My Face had like a carriage chase.
That's right.
Moon Knight City of the Dead had like a Top Gun like aerial chase sequence with Scarlet Scarab. So I love how do you push comics? How do you push the visuals in a medium that is static to make it look evocative of emotion?
Mhm.
And so the way that Speed Racer came into being was I've done work at Mad Cave Studios, and Chaz Pangburn, an editor over there, has been looking to get me to do licensed work since I finished Avalon. We talked about a few different IPs, but either like the timing didn't work or I didn't know the IP very well, and so I wasn't the right fit for that one. And he pulls me aside at San Diego Comic Con and he goes, we've been doing these Gotcha Man comics with Tatsunoko, and they've been very successful for all involved. And so we're going to be getting the rights to Speed Racer. And would you have any interest in that? And it's one of those the wheels were turning like instantly. Like
Yeah.
I could immediately, I was like 15 issues of car chases, and then it wound up becoming 16 when we added in Free Comic Book Day. I was like,
Oh, nice.
I could do 16 issues of car chases? Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm really fortunate that I get to work with like David Tinto on this book. He did Commanders in Crisis with Steve Orlando. He's done
Mhm.
Ultraman over at Marvel. I worked with him on a chapter of Avengers Unlimited, which is how we got to know each other. And oh, he's doing such a good job on it. You're absolutely right that like you need the right artist to pull something like that off. We definitely have the right artist, which is a relief. Um, but yeah, Speed Racer, though, that one is very much a similar approach to Space Ghost. It's brand new continuity, so you don't have to watch the cartoon to get on board. Primarily done in done in ones and done in twos.
Okay.
We've got a long runway, so we're going to get to see Speed's whole journey. But it's Rocky in a race car. It's how does Speed go from just uh, taking the Mach 5 for illegal back alley street races to becoming a Formula X champion, and what puts him on this path, and what are the trials and tribulations that he faces, and what happen, how does he sort of meet, bring together his team, his family for the first time. So we'll get to see him meet Trixie for the first time. She's kind of the Carol Ferris to his Hal Jordan, in
Yep.
that when he does have to compete in Formula X, she owns a struggling race car team. And so suddenly it's sort of this will they, won't they, but also she's his boss, but also he's her only option. And so that's like a really fun dynamic. You get to see him meet Racer X for the first time, and I love Racer X. He's kind of like all the best parts of Batman and James Bond, but like in a race car. Like he's super cool. And then we'll also get to see like Speed having to deal with like the various like rivals and villains of Palm City, where like the thing about Formula X is it is racing, and so you've already got that kind of challenge to deal with. But also, there's like any big sports that has a lot of money involved, there are some less than savory elements that have infiltrated a little bit, and so we do get to see Speed's adventures off the tracks as well as on. But yeah, I think it's the hero's journey. It's the champion's story. And Speed is such a fun and interesting character in that, his love for racing is all consuming. His and I can relate to that as somebody who, for me, it's comics, it's all consuming. And on the one hand, it's rooted in a place of real love that, he saw his brother Rex do this, and he idolized Rex and he wants to be like Rex. And then something happens to Rex, and suddenly this sport, which has been the family's thing, has been twisted to a tragedy. And suddenly Speed feels like he's chasing after his brother's ghost. But at the same time, he's like, this is what I know how to do. To paraphrase, Thank You for Smoking, it's like what? Jordan dunks, Picasso paints, Speed drives.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a really fun book to work on. We're still fairly early in our run on it. I just turned in our second issue for that book. I'm really thrilled with how it's come together. I would say I liked my first issue on Space Ghost. I think our first issue on Speed Racer, and I think our Free Comic Book Day issue of Speed Racer are better.
Yeah.
So uh, yeah, I'm pitching with like pure fastball on this one. And yeah, it was just one of those things that like, the name of Speed Racer and the legacy that cartoon has, and just the really interesting world. I watched every episode and took
Wow.
notes just to kind of like get myself in the right headspace for it. And so we'll be drawing from a lot of characters from that original series. You'll see Captain Terror down the line. You'll see
Nice.
Skullduggery and Snake Oiler, and stuff with the GRX engine, and all the cool stuff for that mythology. You will see appear in Speed Racer. So, yeah, I think it is a sports comic at its heart. There are some crime elements to it, but it is ultimately a sports comic in an industry that doesn't always necessarily support sports comics. But I think the name of Speed Racer, and I think what that cartoon means to everybody, I think that's what lets us go the distance. And having a publisher like Mad Cave Studios that believes in its talent and is so supportive and generous with the runway, yeah, I'm really happy with how that book is coming to be. And I think between Space Ghost and Speed Racer as sort of my two main ongoing titles, with Captain Planet kind of going as long as however the market wants it. It's kept me very busy, but I do feel like these books each have their own individual, unique vibes that I think they feel like different muscle groups to me, and that's how I think I'm able to write all these things without getting too exhausted.
I think going into this one, we always say about Mad Cave, like we're all adult enough to understand that sometimes a book isn't for you. You may, but it's still quality or good or whatever. And that's one thing when I look at Mad Cave, not every book is for me, but every book seems to be quality. Yeah. When I flip through them, when I get my review copies, I look at them and I'm just like, it's just all damn good books. So whatever they do, I just have that faith. I don't even need to know who's writing it. I'm like, if they're doing a Speed Racer book, yeah, I'm not the biggest Speed Racer fan, but it's probably worth checking out just because I know that they have a plan and they've somehow figured it out. They cracked the code.
Well, I think that speaks to Mark London, who Mark London, the head of Mad Cave Studios. I think he, more than anybody I've ever met in the industry, he believes in comics. He believes in creators. He is such a tireless advocate for everyone who works under him. In an industry where like it doesn't always pay to do that, but he really, he's very stand up. He has supported me since my earliest books. And you can feel that ethos radiate to every corner of the company. Everybody who works in Mad Cave, they are the happiest people working in comics that I've ever met. And so I think that really speaks to Mark and sort of the people that he's picked. And so I've been lucky to work with, Mike Martz and Christina Harrington, who I've known Mike since I was in college, since my very first internship in the industry at DC. And Christina Harrington, who's one of the best editors I've ever worked with, and Chaz Pangburn, who's been so tireless in making sure that Speed Racer has been an excellent experience. So I feel very fortunate to have a home at Mad Cave, and and to be continuing to do more projects with them down the line.
Yeah. And I guess I'm going to ask this question for Mike because I know he's afraid to do it. He's a big Fast and the Furious fan. So what he really wants to know is, at what point does Speed Racer go to space? That's what he really wants to know.
Listen,
with duct tape.
When we eventually publish Grand Theft Astro, that'll be
hell yeah.
We'll get that. That book is already written. We're just slowly kind of putting the pieces together on art. But I don't think you're going to see it this year, but maybe in the next year or two you'll see that book. It's already written, so I feel like I have to see the light of day someday.
I did get the subtle undertones when you were speaking about Speed Racer and his brother. It's all about family, is what this book is.
It's all about family.
That was that's all I needed to hear before I was going to read it. Because I can relate to that in Fast and the Furious.
Speed and Rex, there is certainly a Paul Walker, Vin Diesel kind of dynamic there. But yeah, no, we're drawing, I've drawn from Fast and Furious. I've drawn from Baby Driver, Gran Turismo, Days of Thunder, Cars. I watched a lot of racing movies to really kind of figure out how everything works. Nice. Just in terms of how does the sport work. So yeah, I can't wait for people to get to see what we've got planned for this one.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Yeah, I guess I will be reading a Speed Racer book in the future. We'll give it a shot, and
I think you'll like it. And I will say the one last thing I'll give you as a selling point is, and as far there doesn't need to be a ton of updates made for Speed Racer, but there was one that I think maybe if you're a fan of Speed Racer, you might know what I'm talking about, which is, the character of Spritle. Spritel is probably maybe the most of its era element of that show. That if you watched it today, like I did, you might be like, "Oh, that's different." And I really like the way that we've actually kind of built out Spritel and Pops and Trixie and the rest of the supporting cast. We've really modernized them in an interesting way. Spritel especially. Um, he's kind of the scrappy kid brother. He's sort of the street hustler of the family. Like, he had to grow up a little faster. He doesn't really remember Rex that well. But so he's only grown up in the family in like in bad shape. And so he's out there, he's live streaming Speed's races. He's like trying to get like subscriber numbers up. He's like hustling all the bystanders to get him to like bet heavier. Um,
Hmm.
like I like that idea of like Spritel being like not just precocious, but like a little streetwise,
Yeah.
that we're not trying to make him annoying, but he's at the same time, he's the innocent member of the family. He's the one who looks up to Speed in the way that Speed looked up to Rex, but without that tragedy. But also, like, I think, he's kind of the heart of that family, where like Speed, he still has to live up to what Spritel looks up to him for. And so, yeah, you'll be seeing a lot of Speed and Spritel in our free comic book day issue, which comes out the weekend after Captain Planet, but also
Yep.
in issue 1 and beyond.
Yeah, I just remember Spritel being I didn't watch a lot of Speed Racer, but I remember him being the whiny, annoying show.
Yeah, it was certainly a product of its time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And I can say that like this Spritel feels very relatable and very
That's
rooted
good.
in today.
Yeah.
And I think a good way to wrap things up would be to end with Cable. You're working on Cable, Love, and Chrome right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Listeners to the show know Mike and I just not X-Men people. So
To be
yeah,
honest.
I don't know really what to ask you. Then maybe like give a quick pitch for the book. I mean, how you feeling about it? 3 issues in.
Sure.
I know it
So
comes out today as people are listening to this.
yes, Cable 11 Chrome number 3 will be out at your local comic shop today. And yeah, for those who haven't read the book, I pitched it as Edge of Tomorrow meets The Fault in Our Stars. Cable is a character who he's had a lot of wild and woolly continuity over the years, but the thing that really stood out for me that has always been unique is that he has fought a terminal condition known as the techno-organic virus. And
Mhm.
so he's been a time traveler living on borrowed time. And after a mission goes awry, he finds himself stranded in another timeline where the techno-organic virus has become an ongoing outbreak. And so he meets a freedom fighter named Avery Ryder who has the same condition as him. And so it really is this kind of the story of these star-crossed soldiers who Cable's never met anyone with this condition before. And it becomes kind of not just the larger than life pyrotechnics that you need in a good Cable story, but it's also, I think, like a really emotional exploration of mortality and what are the ethics of choosing your how to live and how to die. So yeah, and there's a lot of cool time travel elements that are going to be kicking up relatively soon in that, and the fact that Cable is also a telepath, you will see in our 3rd issue. Without spoiling too much, Cable's on the edge of death. The virus has all but taken him over, and so what does it look like in the head of somebody like that when he's on death's door? And how does he kind of claw himself back from the abyss? And what might that cost him? So it's been a really fun series to work on. It's very different than anything I've written before. It's really taken us some places that have been, challenging to explore emotionally. When you're looking at that death, and you're looking at, for most of us, we think tomorrow is guaranteed. We take it for granted. But for somebody like Cable, for somebody like Avery, how do you live your life if you know tomorrow might be your last? And also on the flip side of that, you know, if you know you're going to die, do you do it with your boots on or do you do it in a hospital bed? How do you do it in your own terms? And on the flip side of that, if you don't find something to live for, you know, if what are you doing? Hasn't the virus already won? So it's definitely that all root comes from my editor Tom Brevoort, who when he approached me for this project, he said, we want to do a Cable miniseries and we'd like for it to be a time travel romance. And for me, the thing I offered back was I was like, Cable's had long running love interests in the past. Domino, Esme Cuckoo, the namesake, the original Hope Summers, Jen Scott. if you're an old ex-head like me. And so how do you fit in a love interest that feels legitimate in the span of 5 issues? And I think the idea of having it be this doomed romance, this idea of somebody who's living on borrowed time, somebody who can speak to Cable on a very core and primal level that nobody's ever really been able to understand or empathize with. I think that's something that's like really cool and interesting and unique for Cable that lets us have our cake and eat it too. And that we're able to, it still feels like a Cable story, like we still have the big explosions, we got the cool action sequences, we've got the time travel and the big guns and the Rob Liefeld energy to it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're able to peel a few layers back on Cable, and we're able to sort of give him some emotional stakes that show a little bit of a vulnerable side to a character who's often been seen as very stoic. So yeah, it's been a really fun series to work on. I'm literally wrapping up on our lettering pass in the last issue now. But yeah, it's been really fun, and I think has spoken to Cable in a way that a character who, out of all the X-Men characters and all their like gnarled continuity, he's like the most X-Men of X-Men characters in a lot of ways.
Pretty
and
bad.
I think this is a way that really can speak to somebody living with a chronic condition, whether you have Crohn's or ALS or cancer, leukemia. Cable is your guy. He is a guy who every day he just figures out this is, this is my life. And how do I live with this? And so I think that's something that can speak to, I think, a bigger thing than just X-Men action. And so, yeah, I'm really happy with how the series has been coming together. And I can say that with issue 3, things are going to take a real turn that's going to kick off a whole new dynamic for the back half of our.
Very cool.
Sounds awesome. I just know Chris and I are so intimidated by the amount of X titles out right now.
I totally get that. Totally.
Yeah, we read a lot of books every week, so it's like
I read a lot of comics. I buy a lot of comics, and just I think the entire X-Men catalog is like my pull list. If I took everything else out from every other company, and I'm on the higher end of spenders when it comes to the pull list, so it's saying a lot.
And one more question for me to wrap up. It's just about product itself. We're wrapping up soon out of these 12 issues plus annual for Space Ghost. Is there any talks or any hints that we might get like a hardcover collected edition or something like that?
So I know they've been doing hardcovers just for the original trades. Like our first 6 issues were collected in both softcover and hardcover. So I assume they're going to do the same for the second trade. And I don't know. I know I imagine you're asking like about like an omnibus treatment.
Yeah,
I don't know what the threshold is for that. I don't know if that's something that would get if you did it in 20 issues. Would you get
I got you.
Or would you need more than that? I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
Would I love an omnibus for Space Ghost? Sure, I think that'd be super fun.
That's all I want.
I'm certainly in favor for it. So write Dynamite, tell them that's what you want.
Okay, I'm gonna email them. I talked to Dave. This is a great idea.
Great idea. I knowing that the first trade did come out in a hardcover format, I can say that
the second one will be around.
I would imagine that the second one would be as well.
Okay.
And I would imagine unless anything changes that would be the case for any subsequent trades down the line.
I just picture.
I would say, Mike, go look up their Gargoyles Kickstarter campaign right now, and
that kind of
let's
gives
just
me
say
an
it'll
idea.
be a while.
Okay.
'Cause I know they're having troubles with that right now.
Okay. I just wanted like a Space Ghost collected slipcover foil outside. I just had this crazy idea for that on my shelf, but maybe one day. Oh yeah, because that is them doing the gargoyles. Okay.
Yeah, and they're behind on the printing. I know there's a lot of like drama behind it.
But
I'm sure they're going to figure it out. But yeah, I know that's been a challenging thing for that company right there.
Yeah.
But
David,
I would love real quick, David. I'm gonna throw you that question I ask you every time you're here. The EOZ number 3.
Yes, Ruben Rojas is literally drawing the last double page spread right now. So we're still figuring out exactly when this year we're going to do it. We were originally going to do it. The original goal was May, but Speed Racer got bumped a month earlier to end of July, so now that might not be the right timing. So it might be after Speed Racer kicks off. So it might be like, I don't know, like August or September. But yeah, I mean, the book is almost drawn. We got 2 left. It's been long written. I believe we've already got the colors done in the first half of that. So I think it's just finishing up the back half of the colors and just doing a lettering pass. But yes, I absolutely want to get that book out. I want to get it done. I love that book, and it's just one of those things like life got in the way as far as Ruben Rojas, our amazing artist in the book, like he's gotten married, he's had kids, since our last issue. So like his life has totally changed, in a very positive and cool way. And then of course, I want to make sure that any Kickstarter that we do, we're not cannibalizing it against another book. And that has been a real champagne problem to have, is that I haven't really had a window to do so in like a year and a half. But yes, I want to do that book. Our Kickstarter backers are just an amazing community, and I want to make sure that they know. And if anyone is listening, I'm promising you this: this book will happen. This is it's literally, we're just waiting for the last 2 pages to get drawn. And yeah, it's going to be a really cool, like, kind of epic finale for this book that I think readers are going to really enjoy.
Cool. When that happens, we'll be on here championing it, man. So I know I really love those first 2 issues.
Thank you.
Mike, I think you muted yourself there, buddy.
Sorry. Before we wrap up today, thanks. That's the first time it's happened in a while. If we want our listeners and our viewers to follow you and all the awesome stuff you're doing, where do you want to send them, David?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Pepose D. It's just my last name and first initial. Or David Pepose Comics on Facebook. You can visit my website, davidpepose.com, or subscribe to my newsletter, Pep Talks, at bit.ly/pepnews.
And everybody out there watching or listening, I will have links to those websites David talked about in the show notes down below, as well as all of his social media, so you can find him on there as well. Whatever you do on those social media networks, you can find David talking about stuff. So, David, thank you so much for stopping by, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
No, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look forward to the next time, man. See you.